Good morning, Jane-Maree and Jessica. Thank you so much for joining me today. If you could just introduce yourselves and tell us about your roles.
I'll go first, Jess.
Okay.
Jess always wants me to break the ice. So I'm Jane-Maree Perkins. I'm a speech pathologist. I'm currently the State Manager of Speech Pathology Services with ORS. It's an NDIS provider nationally, but I focus on New South Wales is my state that I look after. I come with over 20 years experience as a speech pathologist. I've told Jess many times we stop counting when we hit 20. There's no point anymore. And my experience is different to Jess's, so hopefully I'll give you a different perspective as well. So I come more from working in the acute system and working in rehab setting, and I've come into working in disability and NDIS later in my career. So I bring a perspective more from where I see clients that have gone through schooling with different levels of support needs and what adults they turn into. And so my perspective is definitely what you sow in those early stage creates someone in the future that is able to continue to learn and develop in the world. So that's what I'm bringing to this discussion. All right, Jess, top.
Okay, that's tough to follow. My name is Jess Whitfield. I am the Speech Pathology Regional Manager here with ORS. So I support the speech pathology teams across our Gosford, Broadmeadow and Maitland offices. And I also carry my own caseload as well, so I still get to work clinically, which is exciting. I've got about 18 years experience, I think, at last count. And I primarily have always worked in pediatrics. So I started out, my very first role as a new graduate was in disability. Back then we had the health mainstream streams of services, and then we had the disability streams of services. So that was before the NDIS existed. And so across that time, I've seen service changes to incorporate the NDIS, and there's actually been a big push for allowing children with additional disabilities to participate more in mainstream schools and mainstream activities, which wasn't so much the case when I first started working. I've also worked in research and in a research role in hearing loss, and I've also worked in the mental health setting as well, supporting people with their communication to learn to be able to advocate for themselves and be more involved in their treatment plans and goal planning. So I think that's the basic summary.
There's a world of experience between the two of you. The community is very blessed to have you out there in the field doing great work. In terms of ASD level 2, I'll go with you, Jane-Maree, first. What's your experience, particularly with level 2? And I guess because there's no one size fits all with ASD, how do you identify and how does your approach change?
Yeah, look, I think that's pretty much you've nailed it there, is that coming with the idea that every client is their own unique person. The diagnosis is there for a very important reason. It allows us to access the right level of NDIS funding and support for a participant. But the diagnosis always doesn't shape the person as well. The person is who they've been, like how they've been raised, how they've been educated, how they've been exposed to learning environments, how they've been from a speech pathology point of view. It's about their experiences in positive communication. So when I approach working with a child or a young adult with ASD level 2, what I go in and I look for is how do they communicate? What are the techniques that they use? And how do I match my system to theirs to then build from what strengths they already have? So I don't tend to go in with an assumption of how they will be. I go in looking with curiosity to see what they have, particularly in older children, like in adolescents and with adults as well, because there's a wealth of experience behind them that has shaped how they communicate and how they learn. I often find that they're their perspectives on the world can be eye-opening for all of us as well. So it's good to go in with that curiosity because you come out of it learning something as well, which is good.
That's very insightful. And Jess, anything to add there, or perhaps more specifically, perhaps you can talk about your engagement directly. Is there an engagement with schools or the parents of children who go to schools?
Yeah, I think Jane-Maree kind of covered a lot of my thoughts as well. Like, I do have a sign up on my wall that says labels are for jars, not people. And that's kind of the philosophy that I go into every individual I work with, because although they may have the diagnosis of autism of various levels, it doesn't really shape who the person is in any way, shape or form. Everyone has different strengths, different areas that they struggle with. And that follows through to their learning in the classroom as well. So it's a bit like where we need children to follow a curriculum and a syllabus that educators are trying to teach. And every child has different areas of strengths and challenges within that syllabus. So our role is to support children's learning and really working in that partnership with the teacher as well, because we're, as a therapist, we're focusing very much on that individual child, whereas the teacher is looking at how to support that child in the context of a whole classroom of learning. Like, they've got a whole room of kids that they need to support, and there might be multiple children in that class that have varying, learning difficulties, and they have to somehow individualize their syllabus to incorporate the needs of all those children. So our role really is to partner with the teacher to work out how to shape that child's learning in the mainstream setting.
That's very comprehensive. Thank you so much. Now, I'm going to ask you both for perhaps your biggest highlight or an achievement that you've seen throughout your whole process of perhaps through diagnosis right through to schooling. Jane-Maree, you first.
Oh, do you know what? Go with Jess first, because hers is better than mine. Hers is stellar, and this is why I invited Jess, because this is amazing. This made my heart just soar. Go for it, Jess. Tell your story.
So, I have years of wonderful stories that I could share, but one in particular more recently, a little boy I was seeing who has ASD level 2, and he started in kindergarten in a mainstream classroom, and then by year 1 they had moved him into the support unit within the mainstream school setting. And he was just having a horrible time with just school in general, I think, because everything was just really hard for him. And so it wasn't a happy place for him to go. He was experiencing a lot of anxiety and just worry. And to the point where he would come in for therapy and I would pull out a book to do with him, and he would just cry at the side of the book because he was just so distressed about trying to engage in learning, I guess. And we just broke it right down to the very beginning, went back to the start, and I was seeing him every week and working with his teachers as well. And we found books that he was interested in. So it might not have been focusing so much on the actual reading, but it was about looking at the pictures in the book. Let's talk about what you can see. What do you think might have happened? Or, if you were going to write a story, what would happen at the end? Just so that he could have an experience with a book that was enjoyable. And from there, we sort of really reduced that level of anxiety. And within a year, he was reading books. He was loving life. He was asking his mum for when they get the book clubs from school, he was circling books he wanted his mum to buy him, and he won an award at school for his progress in reading, and he got given a collection of books from his library, from his school library, and he was so happy that he cried because he was just so overjoyed about the progress that he had made. And that was just such a privilege to be a part of that little boy's journey that learning was fun for him eventually. So yeah, and it was a real team effort from the therapists involved. There was psychology and behavior support and his parents and his teachers at school, the learning support staff. And when you come together as a team to sort of, really nurture that child, the possibilities are kind of endless. So, yeah.
That is inspiration 101, Jess. Amazing.
It ticks all the boxes, doesn't it?
Right all. Well, I'll just jump over to the final question I have you today. You're going to have a lot of free service teachers watching this amazing interview. What's some advice that you would like to provide them? Start with you, Jane-Maree.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, because I do work more in the older adolescents and with the young adults with ASD too, my advice is that create classrooms that are safe learning environments for anyone, because that safety that's nourished at young ages is what translates into someone who can learn skills for life at their own pace and makes them feel confident to try. And there's so much that Jess and I can do as one-on-one therapists and with the family, but we know that within the classroom, at a certain age within the child's development, the classroom becomes the representation of what learning looks like. So creating kind and safe learning environments where they're judgment-free and they're accepting are the best places to nurture this amazing group of people that have the capacity to be the most interesting communicators that the world can see. So that would be my advice, is to take time to nurture and then know that it is hard work. So be kind to yourself too as teachers. I think Jess and I say that to ourselves and our staff. Be kind to yourself because it's hard to do this work. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Jan. Jess, anything to add?
I think just like I was saying earlier, just to remember to see each student as the person first before you look at what labels they've got. Sometimes you get your class list and you see, this person's got ADHD with ASD and anxiety, and straight away our heads start to paint a picture of what that might look like. But really we need to focus on what that child is like as a person. And I always like to focus on emotional well-being as well because a child needs to feel safe and secure in their learning environment before learning can happen. So just those little things like, do they need some of those fidget toys or sensory toys to help them feel calmer, or do they need like a little safe space where they can take themselves off to the corner for 5 minutes just to calm down and regulate and rejoin the class? Or do they need a little hand signal to let the teacher know that I'm not feeling great right now, I'm just going to take myself off? Just individual little things like that make the child feel like I'm safe here and people get me. They can learn to regulate their feelings and emotions and needs, and are encouraged to do so. And then in turn that improves their participation in learning in the classroom, I think.
Yeah, and not assuming that they understand the social communications or the norms. Like, explain it. Be okay to explain it. Be okay to say, when we come into the classroom, this is what I expected you to do, and create a visual story that goes around with it and repeat it. Repetition is an amazing tool that we all have, and don't assume you've said it once, it's understood. Assume that I'm going to need to say this for the whole year, and that is okay, because all of the kids come into the classroom at a varying stage of activation. We don't know if they've had a bad morning. We don't know what's happened. So show them that respect and kindness by repeating what we expect of them, repeating the expectations. We know that children with autism, they do sometimes struggle with understanding what is their role in an environment. So don't be afraid to tell it as a story, create a visual to map that story out, and to repeat. Like, it's all nurturing, and it's all creating that safe environment, because it's that same solid, safe message.
I think the one other thing that's more recently for me that has really clicked into place is really learning about children with autism and masking and what that looks like and what that means for a child. Because if a child is dysregulated and struggling in an environment, and we see those outward behaviours, like if they're trying to run out of the classroom, or they might be yelling, or those outward behaviours where we can see it's quite obvious that that child is not feeling safe and secure at that time. But for children with autism that are masking, they're putting all their energy into trying to fit in to what they think are the rules and what they think they need to do. And outwardly, they might seem like the child that's very compliant, or, they're great at following the rules, or but actually they're sitting there in extreme distress. And learning more about that has been really eye-opening for me as well, because if we're putting all that energy into trying to manage our anxiety and discomfort, we can't have any energy left for learning. So identifying that and supporting those children is equally as important as ones who have the more outward behaviours that we see.
So, Jane-Maree, Jess, and the ORS Group Speech Pathology team, thank you so much for your time today. The advice, your knowledge, your wisdom, everything you've provided is very much appreciated and valued. On behalf of the University of Newcastle, our Master of Education students, we're grateful for your time, so thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you're very welcome. And I think anything that we can do to increase our collaboration is it's important that we start doing it while we're still studying our profession as well. So happy to participate and happy to help. Yeah.